so this was back when I went full time is 2007.
Oh,
So
good,
when I,
great time. Yeah.
yeah, great time. And you know what? When I started the business in high school, it was 1999. Another great time. .com crash. 2007. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to try and succeed. And boom, you hit that banking crisis that all of a
hmm
sudden just shreds the U.S. economy.
hmm
I'm going, holy moly, like what have I got myself into?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Educative Sessions, a podcast series with people in the developer world about their coding experiences. And this is powered by Educative, which makes it easy for authors to provide interactive and adaptive courses for software developers. My name is Lee Ngo. My guest today is Kevin Mako, who's the founder of Mako Design and Invent. And today we're going to talk about his journey into setting up his firm and really what I found is an interesting balance between pursuing innovation and also thinking critically about pragmatism. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Lee, excited to be on the show.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, my very first question for you is, your journey into Mako design extends several years back, and I want to start off with the point where you were just still a student, and you were actually in student debt when you decided to start this firm. Not exactly the most prudent choice. So, what kept you going while others would likely have folded?
Yeah, particularly not prudent when I was, almost 50K in student debt.
Oh, wow.
And I was class president at the Ivy Business School, which is Harvard Business School, sister school, pick my litter at investment banking, management consulting jobs, all that sort of stuff. But I had started this business, Mako Design, in high school and then
Mhm.
incorporated it while at business school. And I decided to spend a term in Hong Kong University learning supply chain management. So, we came up with our clients' inventions and
Right.
then got them developed. We would figure out how to actually produce them and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And I turned down the job offers and they came with signing bonuses and all that. I said, you know what? I've got like 6 weeks cash flow. I'm going to try and land another customer to pay a few bills. And then as that started to creep up and I was, nearly going broke again, I would land the next customer and so on. And you know what?
Wow.
Still to today, no debt, no financing, no investors, strictly grassroots company that never pivoted. Still the
Uh-huh.
exact same business model that was ideated in high school is the same business now we run with 4 offices from coast to coast.
I'm just blown away because I mean I think there's skin in the teeth when it comes to entrepreneurship, and there's what you're describing where you only started with 6 weeks of runway, and then you really just if it's just you just land this one customer, then things will continue. But how how did you fight all that doubt in your head? I mean that had to have been a lot of it, right?
Yeah, I mean it's terrifying. So this was back when I went full time is 2007.
Oh,
So
good, great time. Yeah.
yeah, great time. And you know what? When I started the business in high school, it was 1999. Another great time. .com crash. 2007. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to try and succeed. And boom, you hit that banking crisis that all of a
hmm
sudden just shreds the U.S. economy.
hmm
I'm going, holy moly, like, what have I got myself into?
Right.
And and a lot of those jobs that were offered to me were no longer even on the table if I
Oh
wanted to come
no.
back, right? Because there's
Right.
a huge cutback of a lot of the jobs, especially the big ones
hmm
in investment banking, and all the signing bonuses were gone, this and that. And I'm like, man, I'm months away from just ruining myself. So my 20s was very interesting, not
hmm
only in that first regard, but when the business started to actually make some money. And I started figuring out the model. And okay, a little, months and years go by and you start getting a little bit of cash in, fighting through the noise. Every time I wanted to double up the business again, I had to risk it all because I had no debt, no financing, no investors again. Right. So I almost played those mental gymnastics for like my entire 20s to the point where by the time I got to 30 and we were big enough and we had our multiple offices now and we were doing well, I really eased off the throttle. And I
hmm
said, you know what? I did that through my 20s. I took those risks. I got it to a point where it's at. I don't want to risk the whole ship again to double up again. So we'll continue growing slow and steady as we have since then. But
Yeah.
it was definitely tough in the early days with that.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. And at the same time, it's fascinating when, because a lot of the subject I want to explore is the question of pragmatism, right? It might be pragmatic to go and get that job with the signing bonuses and all that, but so much of that is also dependent upon the state of the economy, too. It might be arguable, barely, that like going into entrepreneurship and trying to find your own way and finding your own stability might be the better move. So I want to ask, you probably had many points in your journey where you were either told to just like stay the course, or try to focus on this market that seems to be working, or you have felt another pressure to do something new, be avant-garde, right? Tell me a little bit more about like some of the decisions you've had to make along the way that were at these weird critical junctures.
Well, look, you hear the cheesy line, follow your heart, follow your passion, right? It's been beat like a, the expression beat like a dead horse, right? Like that's everyone's heard it and all this sort of stuff. But I'll break that down a little bit to what happened with our specific business model, because it's very relevant to this question. When back then in high school, it was a very simple problem that I faced. I had an invention idea. I wanted to get it professionally made and get it produced in production, and I couldn't find a way to do it. So, classic business startup story. I saw a problem. I said, well, somebody needs to fill this void. I filled that void. The crazy thing is, going into that, when I went in full time in 2007 into 2008, basically every design firm owner that I knew, every product design firm owner said, oh, you want to create world-class product development, but tailored to startups and small businesses.
Hmm.
You're nuts. We
Hmm.
avoid entrepreneurs like the plague. We
Hmm.
avoid startups and inventors. Like, if you really need to pay the bills, of course, take them on,
Hmm.
but then you're going to jump up to your big corporate revolving clients. And that's where you're going to put all your effort and everything into.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, that was more motivating than it was scary at the time. And it
Hmm.
comes back to your question about being pragmatic versus, being an entrepreneur. And arguably, I actually looked at it and I said, look, everybody's facing left. For the few people that are facing right, yes, it's a smaller industry, it's a niche industry. It's definitely, there's less money on the table
Hmm.
overall, but nobody's going for it. So
Hmm.
to me, I actually thought it was very pragmatic to actually go after the industry, be the pioneer of this space. We're going to be the first to do world-class product development for these early stage companies. Bam, we've already got that under our belt. We're the first to do it. Then we're going to be great at this too. So we're going to put in tons of effort and resources to being good to this very specific target group. So
Hmm.
yeah, we didn't get the big corporate clients. We never really got that. Here and there you get some of them, but what we did get is literally hundreds upon hundreds of amazing entrepreneurs that we worked with and that we create tremendous value to, which has created a design firm, which is a very heavy hitting product design firm in the industry.
Hmm.
So I got much further with it, both in my career and in the business, by looking at kind of a blend of passion, what I really wanted to do, which was help startups and entrepreneurs, but also being pragmatic about it to say it's an underserved industry. And it's something where you can really put effort in and be a leader in that space, because it would be very difficult, or even if impossible, to be a leader in the space where the other 1,000 firms are shooting for.
Got it. Wow. See, that's incredible, because that's always been a dream for a lot of entrepreneurs, is to be able to find like a niche that has very little competition, where you can be perhaps nearly monopolistic, or at least like come up with a strategy for working with them so that there's no other interest in exploring outside of that. And it's probably harder work, but you seem to have seen a vision that was almost inverted. It's almost like you're like the way that people work in short selling or something like that. Like they can kind of see the matrix of what's going on and pursue it in a different way than most of the grain, right? That's
Well, and that's
fascinating.
a really
Right.
good point. And
Yeah.
I want to break it down just a bit further for your listeners here, because
Sure.
I would argue, now I've watched over 1,000 startups just in our program alone, just with our design firm, going from sketch to through to development and then on to production. And what I would say is, everybody can find a niche industry and own that industry. The problem is, and I would say this is the biggest problem in hardware development, but this is quite relevant to software development. And obviously, with us, half our products have an integration of hardware and software. But either way, no matter what way you look at it, people feature creep like crazy. And especially early stage startups, they are way too aggressive of trying to be everything to everyone and not really owning a very tiny niche.
Hmm.
So you could look at it and say, I'm going to create a lawn cutting company. Well, there's 1,000 other lawn cutting companies. But what if you're the only lawn care company that uses electric lawnmowers, and you service a specific region, and you're in and out before 10 a.m. in the morning? That's what you're known for. Whatever else, right? All of a sudden now you've created your new spot in an industry.
Hmm.
And even for us, we weren't the first product design firm in the world by a long shot. We're number 10,000 on the list or whatever it is. But we were the first to take a very specific industry, mass manufactured physical consumer electronic or consumer household products
Mhm.
for early stage companies that want to go to production in a world-class manner. So when you break it down to that level, all of a sudden, not only were we kind of the first world caliber design for tailoring early stage companies, but we broke it down to say what type of hardware companies that we actually go after, stuff that's intended to be mass manufactured. So when you look at our vertical, we really owned just that one space and we never ventured outside of it. We're still doing that just till today, right?
Absolutely. Wow. That's incredible. And it's so refined. And in my experiences, people are so like, you can't be too refined because you don't know yet. And yet the leap that you're making is phenomenal. And it's bold to say the least, but I'm glad that it worked out for you. My final question for you is with all the success you've had, and really in the literal bootstrap, not maybe literal, but like in the colloquially known bootstrapped way, that you've been able to be successful, do you have any other tokens of advice for other people who might be interested in following a similar strategy into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a really tough go when you're completely bootstrapping from scratch. So by no means am I out here saying that that's the right way to do it. That happens to be the way that I did it. And if somebody is looking to bootstrap it, I'll tell you, it really comes down to one thing that you have to focus on. You're going to need sales. Without sales and money coming in, you won't be able to pay for everything else. I have never missed a payroll to date, even to today. Whether at the times we nearly were going bust in my 20s, I would of course many times not pay myself, but I never miss paying the staff because you need a great team to do great execution. And the only way you're going to pull that off is by ensuring that your sales pipeline is strong. And that is, number one key element. And a lot of businesses, especially in software, forget that. Where is the money coming from? How am I going to get it in the door? And then how am I going to ensure that that money that's coming in is more than the cost that's needed to go out? So that's critical. And I know it sounds obvious. You need
Mm,
more money than not, but if you're going to bootstrap, it's a necessity because there's no funding that you can go into if you're deciding not to actually raise money. That's
mm,
it. It's just whatever comes in the door. Now you always have the plan B, which is again, like you said in an early question, which is a great question. How are you being pragmatic about it? Always know that in your back pocket, if you really have to, you can do a funding round. Keep in mind too that the further that you push it as a bootstrapping person, the exponentially more valuable your firm or your invention or your software becomes. So the further that you can push it, the exponentially more dollars you're going to get for less equity. So even if you are in a space where you're thinking, and this is common in hardware, um, I've got, I want to raise funds. Well, understand that, especially in the hardware space, if you can get real users, real customers, and you can actually start selling product, that's a much better time to go for funding than out of the gate with the idea because they're going to take half your ship right out of the gate for very little money.
got it. Wow. Um, I mean, it sounds so simple, but I think it's a great lesson to learn about the importance of cash flow and the importance of bringing in business. A lot of people, I think, when they get into entrepreneurship, they think that's a given, or maybe they're even just there's some kind of aspect of perhaps the culture going in saying, that's not really a part of what I need to do. But you're absolutely right, right? Wow. So we've come to the end of our questioning, Kevin, and I'd like to give you the opportunity for what we like to call a shameless plug. I know you've talked a lot about your business so far, but feel free to talk about more, openly about what you're up to and what you might be looking for, or if there's some kind of cause or whatever that is of interest to you as well. The floor is yours.
I appreciate it, Lee. Look, I've just been happy to be on the show. I think the thing I'm most excited about right now is just our podcast. If you're in the software space and you're thinking in any way to integrate with hardware, check out our podcast, the Product Startup Podcast. It's the leading podcast in the hardware development world. There's a ton of great guests, a lot of good nuggets on that. And of course, if you want to reach out to myself or check out Mako Design, if you actually want to get serious about making the hardware component of whatever you're working on, or your connected device or whatever that might be, or even just maybe an invention idea you have, whether or not there's electronics in it at all, check us out our website, makodesign.com, MAKO design.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. And really, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing so much of your incredible wisdom and your experiences. I really hope that those who are listening and watching really take a lot away from what you've shared. If you want to check out more of our episodes, you can look them up on YouTube, or you can check it out on any major podcasting platform. Just look up Educative Sessions. And lastly, if you want to learn more about our main sponsor, Educative, check us out at educative.com. educative.io. So for all of us here at Educative, thank you so much and happy learning. Bye-bye now. Hope you enjoyed that session. This episode is available on YouTube and also on many podcast platforms. If you'd like to be part of Educative Sessions, the form is open now to apply via the link below. You can also email me at lee@educative.io. Lastly, don't forget to like and comment on our content. Be sure to subscribe for us as well. And of course, you can learn more about us at educative.io. Happy learning.